Tonight, in our Exonerated series, I want to introduce you to Mr. Ronnie Long. He served 44 years, 3 months, and 17 days in prison for a crime he did not commit. And just last month, he settled a civil lawsuit with the City of Concord and the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigations for $25 million. It is the second largest wrongful conviction settlement ever. Still, no amount of money can right this wrong. No amount of money can compensate someone for losing 44 years of their life. So why was he even locked up to begin with? Well, let me take you back to 1976, when Long was convicted of raping a 54-year-old white woman. That conviction was handed down by an all-white jury. But it wasn't until 2020, when Long's conviction was vacated, that it was revealed that evidence had been suppressed, including semen samples and fingerprints from the actual crime scene. And those samples did not match Long's. And the court said the evidence was deliberately withheld by law enforcement. Unbelievable to think about. Joining me now, Ronnie Long and his lawyer from the Wrongful Convictions Clinic, Jamie Lau. Mr. Long, thank you so much for joining us. Just hearing what has happened to you, it's unbelievable to imagine. You were released from prison on August 27th, 2020. And I hear that you bought yourself the car you always wanted. You're hoping to buy a home with you and your wife. And I wonder, what was the first thing you did after regaining your freedom and knowing that it had been fully vacated?
First and foremost, I give praise and honor to a greater creator. To even be here to tell my story. I want to appreciate you. I appreciate you people on CNN for having me on. First thing I did, I went to see my mother and father. My mother and father deceased. They died within those 44 years. The first thing I did, I had to go visit their grave and let them know that I done returned home. Even though I know my father and mother died with a broken heart, it was a pleasure to me to even just be there to say that, because the things that I went through, it was a time, I didn't even be able to see that far. I wasn't able to see that far.
And Jamie, I want to ask you, can you just bring me into this quest for Ronnie's release? At what point did you realize that there was this evidence that could have exonerated him that had been withheld?
When I got involved in the case, we had learned at the time a prior attorney had really worked on some state court litigation and uncovered that they had a bunch of evidence that had been suppressed, that once we obtained the reports for, indicated that it all pointed away from Ronnie. What he was telling everybody all along, that he was innocent, the evidence supported. After we got involved in 2015, it was learned that over 40 fingerprints taken from the scene had been compared against Long. They were believed to be the fingerprints of the perpetrator of the crime, and he was excluded from each and every one. So at his trial in 1976, none of this evidence was known to the jury, and law enforcement officers actually took the stand and testified that all the evidence in the case hadn't been tested, hadn't been brought to the lab, knowing full well that it had been brought to the lab, and it excluded Ronnie as the possible perpetrator in the crime.
I mean, that was, you said 2015. You weren't released until 2020, Mr. Long. And just thinking about, I mean, my head is getting ready to explode just hearing about this evidence being withheld, about the jury not knowing about this exculpatory potentially evidence. And of course, it did in fact exclude you. I mean, I just wonder if you could speak to those people, if you could go back and understand what was going through their head in that moment, what would you say to those who withheld that evidence from trial? And also the jury itself, all white, what would you say looking back?
I say that each and every step that they took, it was malicious and it was intent. My thing is this here: how do you go to a grand jury and get an indictment with no evidence. Because every piece of evidence that you collected from the crime scene excluded me. So what did you present to the grand jury to get an indictment? And then you have, out of 90 people you bring to the courtroom, I mean, you got 3 or 4 of them black. My question was this, how did you come to this conclusion? How did you come up with these jurors? Then from that question, I found out, you understand, that the chief of police, he done went to the county commissioner's office and started deleting name on the master, deleting name from the master list of prospective jurors. This is how I end up with all white jurors. There's 2 injustices that were done here. Not just to my family, but to the victim's family.
Jamie, let me end with you here because I can't think of anything more profound than what Ronnie Long has just said to describe the injustices and the questions that he is asking. When you look at this broadly, the fact that this was 44 years, I can't help but wonder how many other Ronnie Longs are there?
Ronnie's case was a racially charged case in the South in 1976, and he was just released in August of 2020. He's not the only black person serving time in a prison in the South, dating back to a time when the racial legacy of this country is one in which we shouldn't and can't be proud of. And obviously, you know, to the extent that racism was alive and well in the South following the dismantling of Jim Crow, that legacy lives on with regards to people who are in prison that date back to that time.
Mr. Ronnie Long, Jamie Lau, thank you so much for being here and for making us all the more aware of what has happened. I'm sorry to have met you this way, but I am certainly glad that we have met, Mr. Long. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you for having us.